Welcome to the Future You YouTube sessions.
This month's guest is Rachel Down. She is the author of Be Candida Free and the founder of Bone Broth, which sells homemade bone broths, probiotic drinks and wellness products. We discuss Rachel's success in taking her health into her own hands.
It wasn't until 3 years of suffering that I suddenly just was like, I cannot do this anymore. I have to find out what's going on with me.
And she explains the health benefits of bone broth.
If you have an inflamed gut, then it's those proteins like glycine and gelatin, which is obviously collagen, that help to reduce the inflammation of the digestive system.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Michelle.
So where did your idea for bone broth come about?
Well, it was a really interesting question, Michelle. Back about 2014, 2015, I was quite poorly after I'd had my first child, Jack. I'd found that during pregnancy, I put on a lot of weight and I was perhaps craving a lot of the wrong food, so to speak. And to cut a long story short, I had a terrible pregnancy. I had a terrible birth and I was very overweight at the end of it. But throughout my pregnancy, from about 6 months into my pregnancy, I was suffering with chronic thrush infections and also urine infections as well. So it started off with the urine infections, and then I was taking, antibiotics to get rid of them, coupled with a quite poor diet, as I say now. So for about 18 months, I had recurrent thrush and recurrent urine infections, and this was just ongoing, and I was going back to the doctors to and from. My husband used to tease me because he'd say that they had a name for my chair up there because I used to spend so much time in the doctors. I was looking for help, and I didn't. The antibiotics were helping my infections go away, but they were never really getting to the problem of what was the cause of what was happening. And then I had my second baby and the problems continued. I was still very overweight. I was 16 stone at the time. And it wasn't until 3 years of suffering that I suddenly just was like, I cannot do this anymore. I have to find out what's going on with me. Like, I couldn't get the support through the doctors. I went for various different exploratory examinations at the hospital, always coming back, no, they're fine, there's nothing wrong with you. And it was just more like, you just got to get on with it, this is your life. So that was for me at that point. 3 years later, after having all these problems, I was like, I've got to discover my own research, I've got to find out what's wrong with me. So I decided to look at diet, thinking I probably wasn't having a very good diet at the time. And as I was researching a lot more, I was discovering more about gut health, and it became a really big interest for me. And I was thinking, well, actually, maybe this, I need to understand this a bit more. And through looking into gut health, I then discovered a condition called Candida overgrowth, which is basically a fungus overgrowth in the body. It's usually in the gut, or fungi grows in those nice, dark, moist, warm places. That you can grow on your skin, in the vagina, the penile area for the men, anything genital regions, the mouth particularly as well. And it's all to do with an imbalance in your microbiome. So in your gut, you have your gut flora. And because I'd been taking lots of antibiotics, I'd had actually over time altered the balance of my gut flora. And when that happens, it allows for other harmful bacteria and fungi to grow out of control. So Candida albicans is an opportunist fungus. It likes to grow, and that's basically what it did. So it was growing out of control in my body, which was causing all of the symptoms. So I thought, well, okay, how I need to fix this problem. So how do I fix this problem? So I learned a lot about leaky gut syndrome, gut inflammation, and how all of those things, and obviously the gut flora, as I've just mentioned, and how all of those things can cause this digestive problems and all that sort of stuff. So then cue the bone broth, going back to your original question. So yeah, I discovered broth. I'd heard about it before, and I was looking around the country for a good broth supplier. But they were really massively expensive. And I just, we weren't earning very much money. I wasn't working at the time. I had 2 small children. I was at home. It wasn't something that I could just afford to go out and pay. So I thought, well, do you know what? I'm just going to give it a try. I'm going to try and make this myself. So off I trotted down to to the butchers and picked up the bones, and I have to be honest with you, Michelle, it was awful. I couldn't make it very well at all to start off with, and stupidly, you know, what you're meant to do is separate the fat from the broth, but it's the first part I didn't do that, so I was literally just drinking broth and fat, and it was just disgusting. So I was like, I've got to find a better recipe. So I just started to research proper recipes, how to make it, and then, you know, I birthed my own recipe. But because I'd had such an awful experience drinking the broth and the fat together, that I decided to put it into a soup. So I was making this, you know, sort of soup with many different vegetables, you know, sweet potato, broccoli, all those sorts of things. And I had it every day without fail for 12 weeks in my diet. I also had designed myself like an anti-candida diet as well. So because of the research that I'd done and understanding that sugars in diet feed the candida itself. But after 12 weeks, I lost 2.5 stone, and my husband just lost over 1 stone, and he hadn't changed anything in his diet. And I truly believe it absolutely really helps to aid digestion and speed up that process of metabolism, and help with the breakdown of food as well, which often when a gut is inflamed and angry, those things can't happen. So yeah, it was miraculous. The miracle gold.
Wow, in 12 weeks, that's amazing.
Yeah, I know, 12 weeks. And funnily enough, it wasn't, you know, I never went into this to lose weight. I mean, obviously I was overweight anyway at the time, but it was just more, I was sick of being sick, you know, I was so fed up with it that actually, you know, it was just all about getting me better. And then when I'll never forget when I looked in the mirror and I thought, oh my God, I look skinnier. What's happened? Yeah. And I, you know, did weigh myself then, and I'd lost 2.5 stone, and I kept it up. So, you know, and I still have broth now. I don't have it every day like I used to, but I did have it every day. And after 9 months, I'd lost 4 stone in total, which was really, really awesome. And then in total over the 2 years, I'd lost 6 stone. And the broth is just been such a big part of that. It really, really has.
Wow. And you mentioned a little bit about, so what other benefits would you say bone broth has, and why is it so great for, you know, healing your inflammation and things like that?
Yeah, and that's another really great question. I don't think there's enough information out there about broth because of this. You know, there's not very many science research studies around broth. And actually, being a health science student now, I want to, you know, start sharing some of the science behind broth, but it really is to do with those proteins that you find in broth, the minerals and the proteins that come from the bones. So again, you know, a lot of broth companies, they add a lot of vegetables, and that's perfect for flavoring and all that sort of stuff, but for us it's all about the quality of the protein that's in the broth itself. So for example, our beef broth that we have, it's 3.6 grams of collagen and only 100 grams, which is the highest in the UK for the broth of that content, which is really fantastic. But that's because we use more bones when we're going through that boiling process. And it's certain, so in proteins you have the amino acids, and it's the amino acids that have the anti-inflammatory effects. So if you have an inflamed gut, then it's those proteins like glycine and gelatin, which is obviously collagen, that help to reduce the inflammation of the digestive system. So yeah, that's really where the benefits come from. And plus, you know, you've got lots of other vitamins, vitamin A, although there's not a great deal. I have tested my broth for vitamin A, but there's not, and it's vitamin K is another one as well. And obviously you've got things like magnesium and calcium and all those sorts of things as well. So it can really help, particularly with joint problems too as well. So not just the gut, there's other things like, so people could have it if they've got arthritis or particularly rheumatoid arthritis, because that's autoimmune. That would really help. And skin as well, it's really great for skin because of the collagen in it.
Well, and does it affect the joints in a similar way with the inflammation with rheumatoid arthritis?
Yeah, so again, rheumatoid arthritis is actually an autoimmune condition. So through a lot of science research now, they're starting to understand that autoimmune diseases are directly related to to the gut. And rheumatoid arthritis is one of those that's being explored at the moment. So yeah, it absolutely can help for people in that way.
And you mentioned leaky gut. Was that something you suffered from?
Yeah, again, it's hard to get a diagnosis, isn't it? Because all of this stuff is such new science, it's new information. In NHS terms, it's actually called intestinal permeability. So yes, it does exist, although they don't acknowledge it very well, but I believe it's very common. And I'm sure you're very familiar with some of the other functional medicine doctors, but Dr. Josh Axe, he made a discovery that leaky gut is actually caused by a protein called zonulin, and it comes from gluten. And it's all to do with the tight junctions within your gut that open, and by having too much gluten in your diet, you basically leave those tight junctions open all the time, which allows for the gut to become leaky. So, I mean, look, a lot of the symptoms actually for leaky gut are very similar to something you might be suffering from if you've got Candida overgrowth. Again, the IBS, the bloating, or that sort of thing. So yeah, I definitely think that I had that, and I also, with leaky gut, broth is very good for that as well. So yeah, that's part of the reason why I think I managed to heal it quite quickly, because I was having the broth.
Yeah, that's wonderful, isn't it? It's because you took charge of your own health. You thought, right, I'm not getting the answers. What else can I do for myself?
Yes.
And to heal myself.
Yes, and Michelle, that is so important right now. I just want to stress that, that people absolutely need to be taking their health into their own hands. The way in which everything is set up for people, for the health, I'm not bagging the health system. We have the NHS in this country, but it is an old dinosaur that needs to be reinvented, and they need to start embracing food, nutrition, a different approach to how doctors are treating patients, because most people in the country are sick. I see so much of it come to me through the website, through buying the products. They're buying from me because they're unwell, and they want, unfortunately, these people are considering how they can take control of their own health. And I do feel that we are experiencing that change, but it needs to happen on a much bigger scale, and we need the health system to start embracing it and teaching doctors about nutrition. That is 100% vital. We need to go back to the basics and also embrace more natural health, 100%.
And also, you mentioned about microbiome earlier. So why is it important to have a healthy microbiome in your stomach, and what things can you help to sort of encourage that healthy microbiome?
Yeah, sure. So again, the gut biome is very new. It's new science. So probably in the last decade, we're learning much more amazing stuff about it. It's actually the ecosystem of your body, really. I mean, your whole body is an ecosystem, but this is like the core ecosystem of the gut, and everything lives in a symbiotic relationship, which is amazing. They all feed off of each other, and they all do amazing things together. And I think we've lost that focus as well, of actually us. Everything is an ecosystem. Our whole planet is an ecosystem. So yeah, the gut microbiome in specific, you've got ranges of, there's over trillions and trillions of bacteria in your gut, in your large intestine. You've got over 1,000 different strains of different bacteria and fungi. You've got viruses even in your gut. Lots of people don't realize what's living in them, and their main job is to stop harmful pathogens from entering your gut through food, through air, whatever goes in your mouth eventually, or your nose, and eventually ends down in your gut. So their job is a defense mechanism to prevent any harmful pathogens entering. And unfortunately, lifestyle has now resulted in the microbiome becoming imbalanced in many people, so that those pathogens that enter the body aren't able to be stopped, like everything's about survival, right? So all these bacteria and all these things that enter into particularly harmful pathogens, they just want to survive and they want to grow and grow and grow. So when the microbiome is in its perfect balance, that it stops that. So everything works in harmony. So you know, everyone will always have some harmful bacteria and viruses and fungi within their gut, but they all work in harmony with everything else. So when there is that imbalance, it gives the opportunity for other things to grow out of control. So keeping your gut flora healthy can help to keep pathogens away. So there's simple ways that you can do that. So having a much better diet is obviously a really great start. Choosing better quality meat is really, really important as well. So if you're buying, you know, because you've got to think about the life cycle of where that food comes from. So if it's a chicken that's, you know, not being very well loved, I'm really being quite, do you know what I mean? You know, battery chickens and stuff like that, you know, unfortunately that's kind of farming does still exist. It is sold into mass supermarkets, and those foods are of lesser quality meat and more likely to carry harmful pathogens in them. And it doesn't matter even if you cook it, you will still have harmful pathogens found in that sort of meat. So then you ingest it. So if you ingest it and you've also got a poor diet, you're then ingesting those harmful bacteria, which then creates damage within the gut itself. So the best way to keep it in balance is choose a better quality meat and have probiotics too, like probiotics, prebiotics. So probiotics are basically living organisms that you can find in food, naturally fermented foods. You can buy them as tablet form. And the prebiotics are like the foods that are dietary fiber. So things like you know, certain types of vegetables have got dietary fibers in them, and what happens is the bacteria feed off of them. So it's like essentially their food, and it just creates a process that helps the bacteria to stay healthy in very simple terms. Yeah, so just making sure having a really good diet of vegetables and high quality meat is important, and not too much of the other stuff. You know, I think it's important to think, okay, you know, that's why I try and encourage people to have food diaries so they can keep a log of actually what they're eating. And people are surprised about how much sugar they might be including in their diet, or how many carbohydrates. I think, you know, we really need to break down nutrition into bite-sized chunks for really people to understand what is a carbohydrate. So many people don't know that, and you know, they need to be teaching this stuff in schools.
It's very true, and I think a lot of people don't realize what is a good carbohydrate versus a bad carbohydrate, because carbohydrates are good, aren't they, in certain aspects, because they're full of, the good ones are full of fiber.
Yeah, and energy, which of course you need, and our brain needs, of course. Absolutely, Michelle. It's again education, isn't it?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's been lost through the generations.
Yeah, it has.
Going back to basics with food, isn't it?
It really is. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Going back to those old ancient methods, different types of cooking techniques, you know, that has been lost. I mean, you know, broth, which, you know, it's been around for such a long time. You know, our grandmothers used to boil bones after the roast, you know, and fermentation before refrigeration. You know, that was how people used to make their food last, you know.
I think it's great that you have products that, you know, because bone broth does take a bit of time to make, and it's nice that you're offering that for people who maybe don't have time, you know, and so you still can get that and don't have to worry about, you know, when I cook it, my whole house smells of bone broth. The bones have a very strong smell, so.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, I had 10 slow cookers going in my in my conservatory, and so you can imagine the smell. My neighbours, they were pretty fed up with it after, because I lived in quite a built-up area, and I used to have the conservatory doors open, the windows open, and it used to just waft out.
All the dogs in their neighbourhood come popping around.
But actually, funnily enough, I did get some customers out of it.
Oh wow!
Yeah, because you know, my next door neighbour would run right close to me. She said, "What are you cooking?" And I just explained to her, and anyway, she started to buy a few products from me. So it had its benefits.
However, it works. Marketing.
Exactly.
Marketing by smell.
Yeah, it's very funny.
That's brilliant. You also have part of your business, you have a 30-day program which incorporates the bone broth, but you also incorporate digestive enzymes. Would you
Yes.
mind explaining why they would be helpful?
So when you have gut problems, it's usually thanks to gut inflammation. And gut inflammation comes from when you've got damage happening. So it's the body's natural response to healing. So it has an inflammatory response. And that inflammatory response is always, you know, if you think about when you sprain your ankle, I'm going to break it down a bit here, but when you sprain your ankle, you've damaged your tendons, you've damaged your muscle, and as an immediate response, you get all those inflammatory responses where there's swelling, there's heat, and all that happens to protect that area and to speed up the healing process of it. So, and what happens is, in very simple terms, you rest it, you know, and over time it will heal itself. But with the gut, if you have damage to the gut, which is caused by pathogens, you know, as we were discussing earlier, a lot of bacteria can cause damage to the lining. Pharmaceutical drugs, you know, can break down the gut lining as well. Certain things like sugar, alcohol, and as a response, your body will, you know, the natural inflammatory response might happen on an external point that you can see, but it also happens on an internal point. So then you think about all those things that happen on that swollen ankle. So there's going to be swelling in your gut. There's also going to be a temperature rise. Now, this is a bit of a theory by mine. I've not proved it yet, but I do believe that when there's inflammation of the gut, it raises the temperature of the gut itself. And as a result, and the enzymes, so our body has natural enzymes that are released to help break down the food that you're ingesting. So it's basically a catalyst. It speeds up synthesis, speeds up processes. And those enzymes, so you have important enzymes for protein and carbohydrates and fats, and they help to break down the food that you're ingesting. But what happens with any protein is that if it's too much, if the temperature's elevated too much, then those proteins become what they call denatured, and they cannot break down properly. And it's the same with enzymes. So I believe that when you have inflammation of the gut, you're raising your gut temperature in there, and then that causes the inefficiency of those enzymes. And when you haven't got efficient enzymes, your body isn't then able to break down foods properly. So it will just get passed out as waste. And that's why people can become malnourished. And malnourishment is a massive problem for people who are obese. But, you know, it's never being addressed, because when we think of malnourishment, we think of skinny people who don't perhaps have the nutrients available to them. But actually, it works on the other side of it as well. You know, just because they look different doesn't mean to say that they're not malnourished. So supplementing with things. So I believe that you shouldn't take supplements for too long. I think that they have a purpose. So if you take a digestive enzyme supplement for a while, and you're doing all the other good stuff, like say having the broth, having our probiotic drinks as well, and cutting back on sugar, and taking a digestive enzyme, you are giving your gut the best chance possible to start breaking down the nutrients that are within the gut itself, within the food itself. So I always recommend taking them before a meal. So, you know, usually half an hour before you eat, half an hour, 20 minutes before you eat. And then when you eat, the enzyme's in there, ready to start working, ready to do its job. And actually, I've had some great results myself, and also I do recommend them to my customers as well. And yeah, it just helps aid digestion. And that's probably the science behind it.
Yeah. So that'll just break it all down and release it into your body.
Yes, because the whole point of the small intestine itself is about nutrient absorption. That's where all the nutrients are absorbed from, apart from fiber that we know. Yes, so by having those enzymes, it will definitely help that process of being absorbed, rather than being passed out as waste, which is very common. And and also you've got to remember as well that if people are having lots and lots of sugar as well as in that diet, yes, it is being broken down, but it's also getting stored as fat cells and all that other stuff as well. So yeah, just having those enzymes and cutting things like sugar out for a while, and even gluten as well, you know, that can be very problematic for people.
really good advice.
Yeah, thanks. And I think, and there's a lot of people, I get a lot of people come to me who have a histamine intolerance.
Mm-hmm.
And people can have a histamine intolerance to food where it causes an allergic, so food that's cooked over a longer period of time can cause an allergic reaction of too much histamine being released.
Mm-hmm.
So actually by having broth in itself, but the reason I'm mentioning this is because it's really important, because there is an enzyme, a specific enzyme, the digestive enzyme, that they have linked with histamine intolerance that can actually help improve the condition. And the broth in itself, I always recommend to people who have a histamine intolerance to just literally have a tablespoon of it a day and to start building up tolerance to it, because histamine intolerance is again a gut health problem. So if you turn it again internally and you start to think, okay, well, how can I start to heal my gut to prevent having a histamine intolerance? Broth again helps reduce that inflammation of the gut, helps to speed up and aid digestion, take the digestive enzymes as well. And I've the name escapes me now of the enzyme in particular, but it is important for histamine intolerance. I've got it up on my website, so if anybody wants to have a look at it.
Oh, great.
Look. Yeah, it's very common.
Really? And what sort of reactions do you get? Are you just allergic, hypersensitive to a lot of foods, or?
Yes, very much so. So people who have histamine intolerance can literally only eat raw food. So lots of raw vegetables. So they can't cook their meat for too long, which is obviously can be problematic. A lot of people then don't have meat. So it can be quite really difficult to know what you can have when you have a histamine intolerance. And yeah, the symptoms can be quite nasty. So I think it's, again, it's always about looking at cause. What is causing this problem? The more and more and more that we are learning about disease, the more we are starting to realize that actually a lot of it does come from the gut.
So a lot of us should be thinking about our gut health.
100%, definitely. I mean, look, there's things that you can't escape, things that are genetic, for example, but if you have a poor diet and you've got genetic problems, you're more likely to expose those symptoms and develop into the full-blown condition than what you would be if you were to say, okay, let's have a look at how I can maintain a healthier lifestyle, and again, that really comes down to education, particularly, in schools again, and to parents.
Yeah.
Because it's so important to start it when you're younger, as soon as you can, really,
Yeah, good advice. And if someone wanted to get in touch with you with regards to either purchasing your product or, finding out a bit more about your 30-day health program that you've got, what could they do?
Well, they can go to my website, so www.boilandbroth.com, and I've got lots of information up there as well. So I really want to give information out to people, to give them as much information that they can to help make them make better choices. Specifically, if people want to look at the 30-day digestive program, just go into shop and then scroll down to diets. There is something on my front page to talk about it as well, but look, if anybody really has some specific questions, they can just email me, info@boilandbroth.com. I have just written an ebook, actually. It's based around the program. So when people buy the program, they get not just the program, but they get gut health information, and then they get all the products and the supplements that I recommend as well. So for 4 weeks, somebody will follow the program and include broth. I suggest fasting in there as well, and really stripping back those sugars and introducing more vegetables into the diet, and looking at maybe meat content as well, because I think some people can eat too much meat, particularly red meat. So more white meat, more protein source from that sort of area. And then obviously the supplements, which are the digestive enzymes, and milk thistle as well. We haven't mentioned milk thistle, but most people know that it's very good, supportive for the liver. Particularly if you have a spleen that's removed. A lot of people who have had their spleen removed, and it's actually the liver that takes over the function of the spleen. So just helping aid the liver. So I swear by liver, the milk thistle. And also a lot of people have toxins in their body as well. And your liver can become sluggish in being able to remove them. So just giving it a helping hand for a short while. So that's why the 30 days is really good. And that also you'll get the drinks as well, the kefir juice, which is a very high natural probiotic, an amazing drink, really amazing. So I give it a try. And the ebook is just basically everything without the products. So it's the program and the gut health information, but just not the products. And that's only $4.99 on the website that can be bought, or on Amazon too.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. There's so much great information in there.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. Yeah, I've got a lot. I've just got to find a way to get it out there, really. You know, it's so important to help people, you know, especially nowadays, you know, people have really got to start taking their health into their own hands and looking at how healthy are they really, you know, and what they can be doing to help themselves.
Especially since our gut is so seen with all the science coming forward, how much of an impact our gut plays on our health now. So it is quite crucial for us to start looking after our gut.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, it's good that there's lots more science coming out about it, you know, and the importance of gut health, and also its influence in other systems, you know, particularly the immune system. You know, 70% of the immune system, it lies within the gut itself. So it's important that people start considering what's going in their mouths, you know, because it's making a change for the better.
Yeah, exactly.